Today we're going to take a look at 4 really simple but really useful tones that you can get using the Ventris Dual Reverb from Source Audio. So for the longest time I wasn't really much of a reverb guy. I had a little reverb pedal that I had at the end of my pedal board. You know, I just had it dialed in to be a little bit of atmosphere. That was my kind of mindset with reverb. But I found over the years that, especially getting into production and by playing with other bands, you really have to learn about your use of ambience in the context of a song or in the context of a band mix. Learn to kind of dial in tones to work with other people and other instruments. So today we're going to take a look at 4 really simple but really useful reverb tones for your guitar, and yeah, hopefully you'll learn something from it. Full disclosure, Source Audio did provide the Ventris Reverb for this video, so just keep that in mind while you're watching. And with that said, let's dive in and let's take a listen. So for this setup, I've got a Line 6 Helix set up with a cleanish guitar tone. It sounds like this, just dry with no reverb. So the first preset we're going to take a look at is what I called the perfect room. So I've got the Ventris set up in stereo after the cab and amp block in the Helix. And yeah, let's hear what it sounds like. So you can hear there's a nice bit of stereo width, a bit of ambience on that, but the decay isn't too long, and it's just, you know, it's just adding a little bit to the guitar tone to make it sound a bit more natural. Now let's jump into the Neuro Editor for the Ventris so we can take a look at how I dialed in this tone in a bit more detail. So you can hear I've got a lot of pre-delay dialed in. There's a tiny bit of delay between when I hit the guitar and when the reverb starts. And what this is really good for is it just separates your initial pick attack from the room reverb. If you have the pre-delay set too low, the reverb kind of like blends in a little bit too much with your guitar tone and it sounds a little bit mushy. So let's turn down the pre-delay and let's hear what it sounds like without any. So that's still, you know, a good room reverb sound, but without the pre-delay it just kind of all blends together and it doesn't sound too great. I've got the input low cut set dialed in quite a lot. And what this does is it just filters out any of the low end being fed into the reverb signal. And this just cleans up the low end so there's not a lot of like, you know, low mid-range and low frequencies that would just muddy up everything. I also have the bass turned down on the EQ dial here, which again helps with cleaning up some of the low mid-range and low frequencies. And I have the treble dialed back a little bit because I wanted this to be a bit more of a dark room reverb. You don't want it that much treble because it just sounds a bit unnatural. So let's turn it up and you can hear what that sounds like. I find keeping the treble down just, you know, preserves some of the upper mid-range for your actual guitar tone. Again, it's just to add a little bit of ambience without it getting in the way of your guitar tone. And that's how I would use a room reverb. So this next preset is called the Dark Spring. Now for the last preset I had the Ventris set up in stereo at the end of my signal chain. This time I have the Ventris set up before the amp and cab in a more traditional mono setup. I'm using the True Spring algorithm on the Ventris and this sounds like incredible to me. So to me, a spring reverb is, you know, a very vintage voiced reverb, and it works particularly well in front of an amp because that's kind of how we're used to hearing spring reverbs. You know, usually they're found in the spring tank on a amplifier. The tone is very much a part of the guitar sound. Now, what's really great about the True Spring reverb on the Ventris is it has, you know, that very typical drip sound that you'd hear in a lot of spring tanks. Now we turn off the overdrive and turn up the mix of this, and I'll show you what I mean. You can hear when I really dig into the strings, you can hear that splash in that spring tank, you know, rattle. last thing, if we take a look at the Neuro Editor again, you notice for this one I don't have any input low cut dialed in. I have the bass turned up quite a lot and the treble just below 12 o'clock. The reason I've done this is by default these are kind of the normal settings that Source Audio have dialed in for this type of engine. But Spring Reverbs aren't, you know, very high fidelity. They're really more kind of vintage voiced. They have a lot of character. You know, it's a very mid-ranged, almost lo-fi sound. So for me, when I'm dialing in a Spring Reverb, it's either to achieve some mono depth or it's for more of a character part. And with a higher mix, you're really dialing in the character of the reverb to be a bit more of a part of the guitar tone. Okay, so next up I've got a preset called Mod Club. Let's just take a listen to it and I'll explain how I created it afterwards. So. Okay, so this is like a nice lush modulated reverb. I've got the Ventris again set up in stereo at the end of the signal chain. Normally when I'm dialing in a reverb like this, I'd normally reach for a hall or a plate reverb, you know, something with a nice long decay. But for this pedal, I actually found really good results for using the room reverb again. In the Ventris editor, the room reverb can have all these different types. By default, it's just room, but I've dialed into the club setting here, which just sounds a little bit larger and it's got a bit more of a different image. Again, I have the input low cut dialed in all the way, so this is filtering out pretty much all of the low end going into the reverb. I've got the bass turned down quite a lot, and I also have the treble turned up, you know, much higher than I had the first preset. And what this does is it just kind of shapes the reverb to sit on top of the guitar tone a little bit more. Let me just play something percussive. You can hear the character of the reverb. You know, a lot of pre-delay, a lot of brightness, and also a lot of diffusion. And all of this kind of adds up to that nice lush ambience, but it just keeps your guitar tone and your pick attack intact. Try to say that a couple of times. Also pay attention to the modulation amount with this type of reverb. So you can see I've got the mod depth turned up quite a lot and I've got a slow rate. This way we're getting a lot of movement in the reverb decay, but because the rate is slow, it just kind of achieves this nice lush modulation over a longer time. Now this type of reverb is a little bit cheesy and perhaps a bit overused in a lot of things, but for me I find that, you know, in the right moment of the right song, in the right production or the right live show, whatever scenario, in the right moment it can be like the perfect thing to add to your guitar tone. So yeah, that's a look at the modulated club reverb. Okay, so last up I've got a tone dialed in that isn't really a reverb at all. I've called the preset the memory delay. Okay, so what's really cool about the Ventris is it has a dual DSP engine in it. This way you can run two different reverb engines at the same time. You can run them in series, you can run them in parallel. It's very powerful. On the left side of the pedal, you have kind of more traditional engines like what I've covered so far, you know, room reverbs, halls, springs. But on the right hand side, you've got more kind of advanced reverb algorithms. So for the first engine, I'm using the echo Verb. And what this does is in a single reverb engine, it's got an echo line and a reverb combined into one. And that's without even touching the other reverb engine in the Ventris. So you can see there's quite a lot of creative possibilities with this particular pedal. Even though this algorithm has a reverb built in as well, I have the early /reverb dial turned all the way to the left to the early reflections. And this way we're only using this engine as a delay. So let's hear what this sounds like. Echo setup is I have quite a lot of high cut and low cut to make it, you know, quite a mid-rangey dark delay. Bit of a lo-fi, low fidelity delay repeat there. Again, I've got the input low cut dialed in all the way, so we're not getting too much low end on the repeats. Treble and bass turned down a little bit to, again, try and get that low fidelity delay repeats. But I've got some modulation dialed in on the echo repeats as well. So I've got the depth turned up a little bit, it's not too high, but I've got a much higher rate than anything we've looked at so far. to me, and the reason I call this preset the name I did, it kind of sounds like a deluxe Memory Man type of modulation. So what's really cool about a Memory Man style delay is, to me, it almost sounds like a reverb. It plays the role of a reverb. That modulation just adds some nice depth. I have it set up to be a dotted eighth delay, so you get those edge U2 type of tones really, really easily. But yeah, I find it's just a really great way of adding a lot of atmosphere without it sounding like a delay. Now, as I said, the Ventris has dual reverb engines. So up in the top here, you can see I've got it set to dual parallel A plus B. Normally you'd need like a mixer, like an actual mixer on your pedal board to do this with separate delay and reverb pedals. The fact that we can do this right inside the Ventris pedal is really, really cool. I just think it makes it a really versatile pedal to have on your pedal board. So for this second engine in parallel, I just have a little bit of Shimmer Reverb. We've got a nice octave, a bright octave up blended in on top of everything. And because the first engine is a bit more of a mid-rangey delay, adding in a bright Shimmer Reverb with the mix dial in just a little bit fills in the gaps that we don't have with the top engine. And yeah, it sounds like this. Alright, so that was a quick look at 4 simple but hopefully useful reverb tips and tones. Thanks again to Source Audio for supplying the Ventris Dual Reverb for this video. I try to make this video in a way that all the tips and tricks can be applied to whatever reverb pedal or reverb you're using in a guitar scenario, but also in a production or a mixing scenario as well. Hopefully these tips and tricks will be somewhat useful, and yeah, hope you learned something. Be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and please consider subscribing as well if you want to see some more content from me and you want to support the channel. Yeah, thanks again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.